Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to begin by giving up praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and to the apostles of the millstone, and enough respect to the brothers that they're pushing and spreading the gospel of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, to the four corners of the world. Now, through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, I wanted to do a quick lesson, and Lord willing, this be edifying. It's actually a lot of information. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to break it down and, split it into different videos. Or I guess I might have AI the next round, break down this so it's easier for us to understand it. All right, so this is the website that I'm on. It's called understandingwar.org, right? And I'm on the Institute for the Study of War, right? And so it says here that the Institute for the Study of War, the ISW, and the Critical Threats Project at the American Enterprise Institute are publishing 2 updates daily to provide analysis on the war with Iran. The morning update will be focused on U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iran and the axis of resistance response to strikes. The evening update will be more comprehensive, covering events over the past 24-hour period and refining items discussed in the morning update. This is why I believe it's best to go over this during the evening. And so here are some key takeaways. It says Russia is reportedly sharing intelligence with Iran to support Iranian attacks against U.S. forces. If you in the Middle East, and if you remember correctly, when Russia started a war with Ukraine, it was America and its allies that funded Ukraine, right, to stand against Russia. And they went on and a big rant about how much morally superior, right? How much, wrong Russia is and how they are supporting Ukraine and they're doing the right thing and yada, yada, yada. And we all remember that. Well, now the scenario has changed. You have the U.S. and the Israelis starting a war, right? You have the U.S. carelessly starting a war, for reasons that was really skeptical to everyone. They made some claims about Iran developing, nuclear weapons, but they didn't really have any, and they didn't really show any evidence, right? No one was really convinced that was what's going on. And furthermore, there's been a lot of negotiations going on, but the U.S. and the Israelis showed their, recklessness by conducting strikes while negotiations were going on. We all remember that too. And so this is them in a situation where they don't have the moral high ground. And when somebody steps in to support the little guy, now they turn around and they make threats against Russia. And this is why the scripture talks about the hypocrisy of Esau. And it says, what business, right? The scripture talks about it. Let me see if I can look it up on my phone. What hast thou to do to declare my righteousness, right? And this is against, wicked people in general. But yeah, Esau, his nature was not to be the righteous one. He's always, shooting off his mouth about him being, the smartest person, the one with the highest morals and so on and so forth. But really, he was just a prideful person who, at the moment of peace, was just planning wickedness that has not been made manifest yet. So now the news is that Russia is stepping in and they're supplying intelligence to Iran. There are other reports that also talks about Russia sharing what was it? Is it drones or something like that, if I'm not mistaken? Or was it the other way around? Right, it says sharing intelligence and military cooperations with Iran, providing imagery, satellite imagery, and improved drone technology to aid Tehran's target of U.S. forces in the region. There it is. All right. So, key takeaways, that's one of them, which highlights the deepening cooperation between the two major U.S. adversaries. Right? When you go into the book of Ezekiel, the 38th chapter, what is it tells you about it, right? Gog and Magog. And Salakia for my coughing. It's gonna be going on for a while. I'm not feeling good, but I'm gonna try to push through it. So you just bear with me. Um, you go into the book of Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, and this is prophetic by the way, because John even mentions it in the book of Revelations, the 20th chapter, which I think I'm gonna begin with that just to prove that Ezekiel 38 is prophetic. So the book of John, chapter 20, verse 7, it says, "And he shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sands of the sea." All right. So they play a role, right, so they went up to the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, which is the land of Israel, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. And this is the same thing that we're going to read about in the book of Ezekiel, the 38th chapter. So we know that the downfall of this age begins with Gog and Magog going into what? Going into the land of Israel. And if Iran has already begun to go up against the land of Israel, well, then what does the book of Ezekiel tell us? That, yeah, the prophecy has Russia being the spearhead, right, against Israel, but it tells you here that they are that they have Persia with them, right? Which Persia is what we modern day which we call Iran today, right? That's the modern name for Iran. Before Iran was Iran, it was commonly known as Persia. And even when you go into the Persians, right, the Elamites, you'll find out that it's really not just it's not just Persia, right? Because you have the Indians, Pakistanis, the Bangladesh, all these Elamites that are within that region are, in a sense, all Persians, but Iran is like the face of Persia, and we are beginning to see these ties strengthening. That's why the Institute for the Study of War states that there is a deep tie, right? They want to highlight the deepening ties, the deepening cooperations between two major U.S. adversaries, which is Iran and Russia. Iran may not have regular access to high-quality satellite imagery, even from commercially available sources, and may be relying on Russia to get such imagery. And this is something that America really doesn't understand. Whenever they start war against a nation, they consider the things that the nation does not, that nation doesn't have. But what they fail to consider is that while that nation may not have it, another nation may excel in the things that, if that nation could get a hand on, could make a stand against America. So they can work together, and then they can put up a mighty resistance if, right, they don't even end up overcoming you. The same thing that ended up in their war in the Middle East, when they went into Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then they ended up just pulling out because there was nothing left for them to do. Right, the war just went on and on and on, and eventually it got too expensive for them, you know. And then when they left, all that they had worked for, all the lives that was sacrificed, was nothing. It was nothing came out of it. Okay, so it says Iran may not have regular access to high quality satellite imagery. Oh, so I already read that. It says multiple people familiar with U.S. intelligence stated that China may be preparing to provide Iran with financial assistance and missile components, showing you that we are at an age where American sanctions really isn't a threat to anyone. And this is a pattern that has been repeated many, 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 many times, right? You have so many nations that have survived American sanctions, and eventually people are going to come to the conclusion that maybe America is not so scary after all, right? Maybe we don't really, sanctions aren't really as bad as, we said they were. And seeing as how the Lord has put the spirit of war in the hearts of these world leaders, when it comes to them making sacrifices, you know, economic sanctions from America won't deter them from achieving, from making, these kind of sacrifices, because they know that any nation that's ever sacrificed and weathered out American economic sanctions has always survived. So eventually, that's not going to be anything that really strikes fear in their heart anymore. Or at the very least, it becomes a light thing. So, and China, is getting involved also. So we read here in the book of Ezekiel, the 30th chapter, that you got Russia, right? When they start something, when the Lord puts the hooks in their jaws and brings them, to the same mindset that they were in, they were gonna be in a war like, right? And they showed that when they went into Ukraine. Okay, evil thoughts comes into their head, and they showed, and when they went to Ukraine, they kept referencing how they are taking back the things that they lost from their Soviet empire. So they have begun that that mindset, and then that mindset is going to trickle down to their what to the people that are with them. That's why you have China openly coming out and picking a side and getting involved. We're going to help Iran. That's why when the Strait of Hormuz closes, no one says, hey, America has put sanctions on Russia, so where are we going to get our oil from? They don't really care about it. They just went right ahead and started buying Russian oil. And Russians are making a lot of money. A lot of money. So eventually, America will see that they may be strong against one nation, but against a coalition of the entire world, they will stand no chance. This is what it talks about in the book of Habakkuk, the second chapter, that, you know, yea, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, right? His philosophies, his, economic sanctions, okay? Well, his economy, his capitalism and all these things, he prevails over the world with these thought processes, and it has reached over to the other nations as well. It is the prevailing trend in thinking right now is, Western mindset. So it says, because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, and neither keepeth at home. That's why he has these military bases all over the world, right? There is not any continent that America has not been. That's why he even wants to take, Greenland from his own allies. He keepeth not at home. That's why he's getting involved with a war in the Middle East that ain't got nothing to do with him. He keepeth not at home. Who enlargeth his desires hell, and is as death and cannot be satisfied. All the wars that they started over oil, America had a huge oil reservoirs, but they're not using it. They want to use other people's oil. They want to run through it, run it dry, and then they want to still have theirs. You know, they have great oil reserves, but nothing satisfies them. They still want to, oppress people for all these resources which America has in abundance. But gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. Shall not these take up a parable against him. So these nations are going to come to the realization of what it is that you're doing and a taunting proverb against him and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his, and how long, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Right? Now, this sounds, but this sounds like, a victim who is wary and is, asking for justice from, a third party, but, this is really going to come through them, right? The Lord is going to actually put the Spirit upon them to actually go up against America. That's why verse 7 says, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. And what is that vexing, right? I believe, wait, where have I heard that word before? She. It sounds like Second Ezra, the 15th chapter. Give me a second. No, it's not in there. I'm thinking of it. I don't know why. I don't know why it suddenly jumped at me, but I thought I had read it somewhere else before, but I guess I have not. So Ezekiel 38, and let's get back to it. So we're just gonna go over this first point. So it says 3 officials familiar with intelligence on Russian support for Iran told the Washington Post on March 6 that Russia has been giving Iran the locations of U.S. military assets, including warships and aircrafts. Yeah, that's why they've been hitting these things with ease. Since the U.S.-Israeli February 28 strikes against Iran, one of the officials characterized Russia's provisions of targeted information to the strikes to strike U.S. forces in the Middle East as a petty comprehensive effort. The Washington Post noted that analysis indicated that Russia reported intelligence sharing fits the pattern of Iran strikes against U.S. command and control infrastructure, radars, and temporary structures. The Center for Naval Analysis principal research scientist Mike Peterson stated that Russia could be giving Iran high-quality satellite imagery with which Iran could identify what bases the United States and its allies are currently using, and other information. And let me see. Hey, and America is finding itself neck deep in this conflict. That's why they are trying to call on the UK, on these European nations to come in and help with the mess that they created, but they can't really get any effort. France explicitly came out there and stated that they will not be dragged into a war like that. You can't start a war without anyone's consent or anyone's input, and then come around and say you need help. That doesn't make any sense. No one asked you to go. There was no reason for you to go. In fact, these nations were all they tried their best to solve the matter non-violently, but America would not listen. They would only listen to one particular person, Benjamin Netanyahu. And now look at the mess. Now let's move on to China's help. China may be preparing to provide Iran with support according to multiple people familiar with the U.S. intelligence on the issue. The intelligence suggests that China may be preparing to provide Iran with financial assistance and missile components, right? And boy, oh boy, do the Iranians have missiles, and they're gonna get it, and the missiles are working. Remember when Trump will boast about the Golden Dome, the Golden. Well, guess what? It ain't working too well. The missiles are getting through. You boast about this highly dome, and it can only stop what it can stop only 50 missiles. You know how many missiles the scripture says will get shot off? Will count to the destruction? 200 million missiles. John said, and I heard a number. China has historically provided Iran with sodium. I'm not even going to try to pronounce this name. Right. Let me just try it. Perchloride to support Iran's ballistic missile program. Sodium perchloride is a chemical precursor to solid missile propellant. European intelligence sources told CNN in October 2025 that Iran received 2,000 tons of sodium perchloride in several shipments that arrived in Bandarbas, Iran, from China. These shipments came amid Iranian's effort to rebuild its ballistic missile program following June 2025 Israel-Iranian war. Now they're definitely building ballistic missiles, and they're going to put a nuclear warhead on that. This is what you wanted? And in retaliation, America is also sending new missiles to Ukraine. So this is how it begins. Prophecy is literally playing in front of our very eyes, and this is how World War II started. It begins with always trying to get one over your opponent. Oh, he did this, I'm gonna do this in return. Oh, he did this, all right, I'm gonna do this in return. Then it keeps escalating. All right, let me do this and one more, and then your opponent they retaliate and with two other things, and then you go on and then you start dragging people into it, and then boom. All right, but it's if you read the news, and let's say the UK, right there, the European nations, it's not just UK, but let's just say the European nations, NATO and the EU are saying they don't want to go into the Middle East, right? And you have North Korea, which have not officially gone into the Middle East, right? You have in China being involved, but they have not officially gone into the Middle East. When you read articles like this, right, understand that it will come to pass. The Lord will gather these heathens into the valley of Jehoshaphat. And the only reason that has not happened is because other things must come to pass. For example, the chip, the micro, right, the radio frequency identity chip, it has to come to pass. And when it does, that's when the four angels who hold back the destruction will be given the order to let it loose. Then you'll see the power of the Lord, right? And like Yahushua said, when all these things come to pass, right, then we shall look up, for our salvation, our redemption draweth nigh. So in closing, I want to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahushua, Bahashem, Rakha Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.